Hey everyone, we are live yet again, and this is going to be one of my authors' chats of the week. And I'll keep my eye out for my co-host, and we'll see when he's ready to jump on. We'll go from there. We'll be talking about books, writing, publishing, and everything in between. And I'm excited because it's now less than a week before the final omnibus of the Guardian Speakers launch, because that will happen next Tuesday. So I've been working, just making sure all the files are ready to go, and we'll be launching that book, and it'll be the first time the final 4 novellas will be in printed form. So that's a big thing. And I'm going to turn my volume up since I always forget to do that beforehand. We'll see. Let me see this up. Hello, hello.
Hello, let me see if I can get my video working.
It always does this, and I don't know why it automatically puts the little icon on and assumes that you don't want to be seen.
Yeah, okay, let me see. I'm usually like decently tech savvy, so let's see if I can figure this out.
I trust you because I'm not tech savvy, so
Okay.
I don't know how to help on that one, but at least I can hear you, and that is the most important part. So seeing you would be preferable. And I was just mentioning, oh, there you go.
There we go, we got it.
Perfect. Well, thank you for coming and joining me on my little weekly chat. And you're one of the figures that I've seen around for a little while now, but I've never been able to talk face to face. So this is exciting for me.
It is, yeah, and thank you so much for inviting me on. This is like a really cool thing to, get to, again, just talk to you face to face and also, meet some of your fans and current readers.
Absolutely. And I don't know if you've ever listened to any of my lives, but since you're my co-host this week, I'll let you introduce yourself and what you write, and we'll go from there.
Well, thank you. Yeah, my name is Gregory Heal. I'm a clean fantasy author, and I write, just young adult fantasy adventure fiction. And the current books that I have in publication are my Sky Jewel Legacy series. So you have book 1, it's called Heritage. Book 2 is Crusade, and I'm currently working on finishing book 3, which should be coming out Christmas 2025. So it's coming up, and
Yay.
a quick bit about the gist of my story is, just think of like if you like Harry Potter and Avatar: The Last Airbender, if you mesh them together, you basically get my book with those vibes. It's about a 21-year-old college girl who goes on the run after she finds out that she's the last living Omnimancer, and an Omnimancer is a very rare type of sorcerer. So while she learns how to control her powers and learn about her true heritage, in this, very spellbinding adventure.
I love that. And I also want to say I have always loved your covers because they're definitely something that once you see, you don't forget. And it just flips. I love seeing things like that. I don't know what the term is where you can flip it upside down. I think there's a term for it, and you
Yeah.
still yes. I can't remember what that term is. And shame on me. I studied art in college, but I just absolutely love that design.
Thank you.
And let me ask you, because as someone who loves all sorts of mythology and the creatures of fantasy, I'm assuming that those animals and entities represented on your cover are in the books themselves. So what are they? Because I think I recognize them all, but I want to hear it from you first.
Yeah, so you're spot on. This is a purple dragon, and then this is a yellow or golden griffin.
Yeah.
And not only are they literal characters in my book, but they also symbolize the antagonist and the protagonist and their journey. And the story about finding or getting this cover is actually quite interesting. I don't know if you're familiar with the website 99 Designs.
Yes. I've never used them, but I know of them, and you're actually one of the few authors, it sounds like, that's worked with them. So how was your experience? Clearly, pretty good.
Yeah, no, it's phenomenal because it's crowdsourced where you put your prompt out there and then you get a flood of illustrators. They're like, hey, I would love to, end up doing your book cover. And so I give them some prompts for the first round, and then you have a ton of people that just submit what their vision is, and then every round you just cut them down. Your prompts get a little bit more specific. And I was going for, at the time, it was very, like stereotypical YA fantasy cover, like a lot of purples in the background, like a moonlit castle, and then
Yeah.
in like the forefront, it's like this really cool medieval like ring. And I was getting some really good turnouts with that. But then this cover designer comes out of left field, and she just shows this, and I'm like, no notes, we're done. And I like just kick out all the other 50 illustrators. I'm like, you won me over. Like, I was not even expecting this. And the way that she was able to craft that like negative optical illusion that makes your eye
Yes.
switch, like, it just blew me away.
I love that. And then your second one is this very similar because it has, if I remember correctly, unicorn. Yeah. And is that a green man or what's the other one?
Yeah, I'm not too sure if a green man is similar to a Leshy, which is like a Russian deity.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so
I
they're like a Russian forest god. Think about it like
they're
that.
kind of kindred spirits, but yeah, a little different, but yeah, from different areas. Because I think the Green Man is a little more the UK kind of side of things versus the Leshy. But no, that's
Yeah.
cool. I love
Yeah,
that.
yeah. And then for me, my goal ever since, my cover designer came with this, it's like I want to follow that theme with every book. And then once I get the third book out, I want you to be able to stack it, and then you can see the colors like merge together.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so like the start of book three will have this like seafoam green, and it'll transition to more of like an earthy green, and then I'm thinking about a contrasting like deep maroon red that would just go into like blood red or whatever. Um, so yeah, I currently have a couple of mythical creatures that I'm planning to use for book three's cover. One is for sure. The other one, I want to see where my story develops to see if I can do it justice.
So, is this going to be a trilogy? Or are you going to plan to go on beyond the third book that releases?
Yeah. So when I initially like planned it out way back in 2017, I was going for four books, but just with how my story has evolved and changed over these past 7-ish years, I figure that like a trilogy, like a really strong trilogy, is what this story needs. And I'm leaving the doors open. I've already had a lot of readers who are like, I would love to read more. So I'm currently playing around with developing like prequels, like the origin of my magic system, or like the first five Omnimancer clans. And then spin-offs too, because I know cozy fantasy might be like is something of a genre that's taking off. And one of my characters, he loves ale and mead. And so I'm like, maybe after he can like start a brewery and then just like tell war stories and have that kind of cozy vibe.
I
So
love that. And it is interesting how, especially once you build a fan base, you can do some unusual spin-offs and side tangents within the world. One of my other author friends, AP Peswick, he did that for his now if I'm going to mess up the name of the series, I was going to say Levanthra, but I'm thinking I'm pronouncing it correctly, series. But he put in a cozy, and he put in a couple, just kind of little one-off stories, but interwove into his original world. Because when you're a fantasy author and you take all that time for world building, and I say it all the time, all that time you spend creating your world, stay in it as long as you can. Have fun with it.
yes.
Don't do what I do and start over with each series. Do the smart thing and stay in it as long as you
Well,
want.
I mean, to be fair, it looks like you found your groove. Like I was looking at your catalog, and I'm just like I'm blown away at how many books you've written and all these really cool stories. Because growing up, I was a huge fan of mythology, mostly Greek and Roman. But as I've gotten older, I've kind of leaned toward more of my heritage, no pun intended. And I'm like 50% Norwegian and Swedish, so like I love Norse mythology. And so when like your initial or like your current um
One of my
series.
theories, yeah, the Guardian speakers.
Yes, yeah, yeah. And I loved all like the runes that or like the different things that you put on the cover for each one. I love that design. And so it really is intriguing me, and it's on my TBR. Don't you worry.
I'm glad. Now that one is my most mature one because depending on the series, I do have my clean YA series, and then I have all the way to the Guardian Speaker novellas, which are definitely for mature readers,
Sure.
mainly because of the violence and the fact that Norse mythology is not necessarily a happy-go-lucky thing.
It's filled with struggle and heartache, that's for sure.
Yes, lots of tears and lots of tragedy, but it is a very entertaining mythos too. And yeah, but no, I guess I was kind of like you, always growing up with this love of a variety myth, and I think a lot of us get interested in Greco-Romans, like one of the first ones we're
Yeah.
introduced to. Then at least for me, it was like Egyptian mythology to an extent, maybe just the beginning, because when you really delve into it, there's a lot more below the surface. But and then you kind of hub there until all of a sudden you realize, oh wow, there's so much more out there. Where was this hiding?
Yeah, no, that's so true. And once I started writing my book, I wanted to pay homage to as many global legends or mythology as possible. So in the Skyjo Legacy trilogy, you will see, inspiration from Egyptian, Norse, Greek, Indian, Chinese. And so, again, like, hopefully I'm doing my best because, like you had mentioned on your website, like you did years of research and planning out. So like you're almost like an expert in the field of Norse mythology. And for me, it's like, I wanted to be able to have my take on it, but still make it like respectful and say like, hopefully I'm not doing anything wrong. But like, it was a lot of fun to bring those other like mythologies in, and it just makes me learn more about like the different cultures because I'm like a sponge. I love learning as many things as possible.
So I guess going back to your first book and the characters you developed, what made you decide back in 2017, I'm going to write at that point you thought four book series, but that's that whenever that spark hits, it's interesting what causes it. So what caused you to be like, I'm going to be an author and I'm really going to do it?
Yeah, like that's a really good question, and like the beauty of that question is like everybody's answer is different, and I love hearing people's answers, and I'd love to hear yours too once I'm done. But yeah, 2017, I had this crazy vivid dream, one that I've never like experienced before or since. Like I know it sounds cliche or crazy, but like if I close my eyes, like it's etched into my brain, and I couldn't shake it. And so whenever I had like free time or downtime in my day, I would just come back to it. And I'm like, where did these characters go? Why were they in this situation? And then I started writing out my questions, and nobody was there to answer them except for me because it was in my head. So I answered them, and it was just kind of like a call and response situation. And before I knew it, I had like 10 pages of notes front to back. And I'm like, you know what? Let's see if I can make a story out of this. And I am a very patient guy in general. And I think it comes from my work as an artist. Like I'm one person who like, I can focus on a current, like a certain section of my canvas. And like, it doesn't matter how long it'll take, but I want to get it just right. And like once I put the brush to my canvas, 5 hours feels like 5 minutes. And that's how I felt when I started writing. And I'm like, you know what, whatever, or however long it's going to take me, it's going to take me. I just know that I'm making progress and that I'm hopefully becoming a better writer through this.
That's wonderful. And again, I've almost parallel story, almost.
Okay.
The precursing part to that is, I guess one part of that answer to answer the same question is the fact that I've always told stories and maybe not writing them down, but always came up with characters and backstories and situations and essentially plot lines, etc. And a lot of that came through my imaginary play with my sister when we were children. So we essentially developed what I now know is called a multiverse. Didn't know that term back then, but it was just anything and everything that we fell in love with, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Digimon, whatever it was, we found a way to just incorporate it into our magical multiverse, and world jump, and we created our alter egos, etc., so on. I, from a very young age, always wanted to share that story. So as young as probably a preteen, I was like, I'm gonna be an author one day, and that was it. Just knew it was gonna happen. Then just never
Right.
looked into anything beyond that.
I love
It
that confidence.
wasn't until years later, when I was probably around 17, that I had a vivid dream, a totally different thing. Vivid dream, couldn't get out of my head, and I was like, you know what? I want to be an author. I know a lot of people need to learn the whole thing and develop their literary voice, and I can't get the story out of my head. Let me write this story and publish it and get my voice down before I attempt the real series that I want.
Okay.
So that one book, which ended up being my debut, turned out to be a 4-book series. And now I'm actually working on and releasing my young adult clean fantasy, which is inspired by that young adult multiverse. So that main character is the main character that was my alter ego as a child, so she has my name. And
So
references
cool.
to a lot of parallels to my childhood, because I was like, well, I grew up in Georgia in the country, so she will be raised in a rural area of Georgia, and etc. So it's been a lot of fun, but
Yeah.
there are some similarities there. And I'm going to side tangent one more time, sidestep. I'm also an author and artist. So what do you do when you were saying you do canvas? So I now need to know what type of painting, pastel. What do you do? I'm just curious now.
Yeah. So I primarily dabble in acrylic.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, so that's what I do right now. I've always wanted to try oil and maybe even like airbrush. But acrylic is just my tried and true. I'm very comfortable with it. Self-taught. And it was just one of those things where like this seems like a lot of fun. I always loved sketching when I was growing up, and so I was like, well, how can I take it to the next level? Like I'm kind of done looking at my work that's just black and white. And so then, I then bought some like Liquitex basics, and I just developed my own kind of style, and I love it. Like, yeah, I'm in my basement right now, and I made a clock about the evolution of Mickey Mouse because I'm a big Disney fan. So like I have that, like all like my artworks displayed around the house, to a point where my wife is telling me that like I need to have like just a dedicated room for all my stuff, and then so she can at least have some say in decorating the other parts of the house.
Fair. That is fair. That is
Yeah.
fair. Yeah. It's totally fair. Yeah, I was gonna say any of the pieces that I have created painting wise that I decided to keep. They're interspersed with other artwork that my husband and I have collected ourselves, and so I try to be respectful and not take over the house when it comes to art.
It's
Books, on
art.
the other hand, they're stacking up in weird piles, and
Right.
I need to figure out how to find more space for bookshelves.
Right, yeah. And so your medium is it reverse glass painting?
Yes.
So what is that exactly?
Reverse glass is a style of painting where I'm painting on glass as my canvas, and it is a mirror image fashion and layers. So instead of, as an artist, you'll get this for everybody else who's listening and probably like, what are you talking about? But you do the close-ups of the foreground, so like the glint in the eye and those details first, and you work backwards, and you put the final paint behind the background
Oh, I
last.
love that.
Have it dry, you flip it around, and you hope it looks okay.
That sounds great. Like that's like a cool challenge. Now,
It is.
with the type of medium, is it also kind of acrylic, or what kind of paints do you use? Okay.
It's fast drying and allows me to do a layer, walk away for a moment, and then come back and do another layer. So
Right.
that makes it really nice. But yeah, I stick with animals and pet portraiture for that one. But that's one of my many hats of my life, and the other one is fantasy. But it is fun to meet how many people, creatives, are artistic in multiple facets,
Yeah,
writing
like
one brand
overlaps.
and visual, and there is a lot of overlap I found.
Yeah, it's really cool. And I'm like not a master of one, but like a jack of all trades, I feel. It's just like, okay, like I've dabbled in so many art endeavors throughout my life, but the one that I'm like the two that I'm most passionate about would be painting and writing. 100%.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Now, actually, let's go back to the writing for a second, because
Yes.
as someone that my YA series is a clean fantasy, your series is a clean fantasy. What made you decide, with the fact that your main character you said was around 21, you could have made that, a new adult, or even catered it to almost an adult audience if you so chose, in the sense of what you incorporated, those kind of themes. So what made you decide to keep it a clean fantasy versus dabbling with some more adult themes?
It was only like after the fact, when I was trying to market it. So I
Ah,
I kind of just wrote it, and I wrote what I loved reading and watching growing up, or just with my current age. I'm 31, but like I love those adventures. I'm not the biggest fan of like a lot of spice. Like that's just not my style. No shame or no harm to people who enjoy it. That my wife loves it. She loves Akatar. She loves Fourth Wing. She
there's
loves
something for everyone, and that's the great
exactly.
thing. Yeah.
Exactly. And so when I wrote my book, I just kind of just let it all pour out. And then, as you know, like that's only half of the upward battle. The other half is trying to market it, find your because like now that you found your voice, your author voice, you have to find your marketing voice, which is
I
completely
don't know if I
different.
have that.
Well, I mean, looking at all of your videos that I've seen, like your engagement is like off the charts. Like so many comments. You ask such great, creative, thought-provoking questions, and I'm like, how can I get that kind of engagement? Because that's really cool. It makes me become more creative on like my style of video making. So, and truthfully, it wasn't until like 3-ish months ago that I finally found my niche or my voice where like, I've been putting videos up consistently for about 3 years now. But then once I realized that my books kind of fit more into clean fantasy, I was like, oh, I'll use that term and I'll have fun with it. And then I've been seeing a lot more engagement and and followers. So like that is what I'm sticking with because it is true. Like no false advertising. Like you will not find, like just some blushes and crushes in my first two books. But it's heavily focused just on the adventure, the interpersonal relationships of my characters, and the plot twists. I've had a lot of readers who are like, I was not expecting that plot twist or so many in one book. It just made them continue to turn the page, which is great because that helped my social proof. To your point earlier about like, oh, I'm just gonna write a book and see if I can do it and see if it's good. I wanted to always make my reader second guess if the trope I'm following is actually going to work, or if I can twist it. And so with that, it was very motivating to see strangers that I've never met take a chance on my book, and then their review was so nice. And I'm like, that just propels me forward even more, saying like someone that I don't know, I can make them feel that way, or my books resonate with them. Outside of my mom, who tells me it's 5 out of 5 stars. Like, of course, she's going to tell me it's 5 out of 5. So, so yeah. And my wife was like, she's read both of my books, and she made a comment. I don't know about half a year ago. She's like, you know what? Like, you should mark like this should be like a scholastic book or people for like middle school or high schoolers. And at first, I was a little taken aback by that. I was like, I don't know how I feel about that comment. Not because like it was a bad idea, but like I thought my writing or my prose was more mature. Um, but what I realized after a couple of days of percolating over it was that she meant like the story, like it's appropriate for the whole family. For kids as young as middle school or even 8 or 9 years old. And once I had that mind shift, that paradigm shift, that's when I just kind of just buckled down on it. I'm like, no, this makes sense. And I never looked back.
Yeah, because you remind me a little bit of one of my other author friends, D.S. Diamante, and because his work that he writes, he caters as a clean fantasy, not necessarily YA because the characters are older, but because it's family friendly. That again, younger kids, teens, maybe even tweens can still enjoy it as much as any adult can, because the story itself is approachable, fun, easy to read, yet still packed with the adventure and that wow factor that a lot of people want in a big sweeping fantasy. So it's always neat when you can find that spot and then find that market, because there are a lot of people out there who want those kind of stories and are looking for them. So
Right, exactly. And like especially nowadays, like it's like a double-edged sword because it's so amazing that you can have the ability to write a story and print it and self-publish it. Like that's phenomenal. Like no other point in the history of the earth were you able to do that. You had to go through the traditional sense, finding an agent, querying, like it could not even pick up. It could spend years and years of your life. Otherwise, you can kind of roll the dice or just take it on your own and you can self-publish it. And it's phenomenal. Like I love going down the self-published route, especially because I get to still control my story and I get to control how I market it. But on the flip side, there's a lot of content out there. And so it's like, how can you cut through the noise and how can you make your books, your videos, your marketing stand out? And so that's always going to be an ongoing challenge, and just how you can sort of watch that momentum grow.
yeah, and I like I said, well, if I haven't said it, I should say it. But yeah, the way you're approaching your videos, it's definitely something that it is memorable. And you do hit the high points. You say what it is. You do the comparisons, and that's what I wish I was better at, because when I started writing my books, my earlier works, I was writing them for me, and so I was, I love my worlds, I love the characters, I love the situations, but they don't. I just didn't approach it when I was creating them of what are they similar to. I wanted them to be as unique as possible, and that's not a bad thing. But for marketing, it's harder. And so I still struggle to this day to figure out good ways to approach it, because I never came in with that kind of awareness in the back of my mind of how to pitch them. Now going forward, all my newer works, I am way more savvy and aware and conscientious of when I'm writing, not necessarily writing to anything, but just having awareness of, oh, this thing kind of has a vibe of the story. Let me make a note of this, because when it comes to marketing, I'm going to, I can use that. And yeah, that's a learning curve.
Oh, it is. It is. And like I'm very similar to you as well. Like, because when I'm writing, I don't think about necessarily what it relates to. It's like it's all after the fact. It's like, okay, my story's out. How can I get it out to the masses? How can I get people excited about it? And um, when I thought about it, like when I was writing it, I didn't think, oh, this aspect is like Avatar: The Last Airbender, or this is like Harry Potter or Percy Jackson. But it was just like the feelings that my books sort of gave me. Though like a really almost not like on the nose one, but for Avatar: The Last Airbender, my main character. So my magic system is five. Like you're born into one of five sorcery planes, and they all have a different category or different powers to them. Like for example, one is animancy. So you're able to channel the abilities of any kind of animal that best fits the situation that you're in. Like if you're thrown into water, like instead of drowning, you can like, channel like the gills of a great white shark or something, and then you can breathe underwater. Or you can swim as fast as a swordfish to get away. And then you have like astromancy, which is like the power of the cosmos and gravity and fission and fusion. You have terramancy, which is kind of like Avatar: The Last Airbender, where you can control all the earthly elements. Telemancy, which is like the power of the mind, like illusion, things like that. And then finally, chronomancy, which is like time manipulation, and you're able to slow down or speed up someone's heart rate, things like that. And then so Jen, who's my main character, she is an omnimancer, so she can tap into all five. And so when I was thinking about how to relate it to things that are already popular, I'm like, well, I mean, Jen is kind of like Aang in Avatar, where she's able to access all the bending, elements. and just kind of ran from that. And because what I've learned is that people like familiarity. Like that's what gets them interested to ask more or to, search your book. And some people, actually, the majority of people are like, they love that whenever I market, it's like, boom, it's like, what you see is what you get. Like I immediately tell you what you're going to expect. It's that promise. It's that tonal promise that I'm giving people. Yeah. Every so often I get someone that's like, it's pretty derivative or redundant that you're, plastering. Oh, it's like Harry Potter. Like it's not unique. I'm like, no, it is unique, but as an like more or less an unknown self-published indie author, to get people excited, everyone knows Harry Potter, Percy Jackson. So it's like, those are the ones that, if you enjoy those books, you're going to really like my series. And so I have no shame in saying that it has vibes of those. It doesn't mean that my books aren't unique. They are very unique, I feel. And they don't follow any kind of the plots of Harry Potter, Avatar, or Percy Jackson. So it's, like you said, it's just a learning curve, and it's trying to see what resonates the most with people who come across your videos.
Yeah, no, and that's very true. And sometimes the things that resonate, again, they give you a vibe or an impression of a certain scenario that's something that they can relate to. So they're like, oh, I know what you're talking about, even when everything else is totally unique. And one of the ones for my YA series, the Clean Fantasy, that seems to be working, which is very interesting to me. It's like the pitch is, what if Alice didn't wake up, fall into Wonderland, but awoke in a magical multiverse with da 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 da, and I go on. But it's the concept of girl is what isekai portal fantasy is transported to a fantasy realm and has a whole bunch of adventures, and it goes on and on and on. But when you're saying terms like, oh, it's a portal fantasy, people kind of glaze their eyes. When you're like, Alice in Wonderland transported, but this time's dropped in a magic, they're like, oh, I get it. Huh. It's a weird way to, it's just that thing. But yeah, marketing is a strange animal, and it's one that I'm still trying to wrangle every day.
Me too. But I have a lot of fun making videos and seeing what kind of fun audio I can use. Because growing up, I was always that person who's like, what's going to be the soundtrack of my life? And now I'm kind of like transitioning. It's like, what's the soundtrack of my book? Yes. And what can I do to like just again up the ante, increase the hype, the excitement, the intrigue for my book and what it could mean to whoever picks it up.
Do you offer signed copies from yourself, or are they all sold through other platforms?
Yeah, I do. So I have my home office. I have a bunch of paperbacks and hardcovers that I do sell signed copies of. So every so often someone DMs me, and then we just take care of the details, and I ship them off the next day. So
here's the thing. Now you need to come up with a little printable playlist of the playlist sounds of your books to put in with those, or do something with a QR code and send them to a Spotify and say, here's the soundtrack to the books, because you're saying that you could do it. Why not?
Yeah, that is such a creative idea. I love that. Well, okay, I'm going to have to workshop that. That's great.
Yeah, so now actually think about it and be like, what would be the soundtrack to your books?
Right. No, that's fantastic. I love that. Like, it's almost like I think of when you just mentioned that, like the beginning of Treasure Planet, when they play John Rzeznik's song.
It's been so long.
I forget the name of it, but it was so good because it just set the tone for the movie, and like it just got me excited, and that was just the vibe throughout it. So I love just trying to see how I can make my my world more rich, and I think that's a great way to do it.
Oh yeah, definitely, because right now I'm releasing early access to an upcoming Greek retelling, the first of a duology through. I just started a Patreon, trying to see if anybody wants to jump on the membership bandwagon. But one of the things that I have in my back pocket, if anybody wants to join in and come along this journey with me is the idea of let me give them soundtracks and playlists that kind of go along with the theme. So it was a lot of fun with me, like listening and looking into all different styles of Greek like music. Some of them are more modern that kind of have Greek references. Others are kind of more like the ambient soundtracks that kind of reminisce of that era. And I'm like, oh, this will be this kind of soundtrack. This will be this playlist. This is so much fun. But I think more authors should do that because it's something that's easy to do. And especially if you send out copies yourself, just tuck a little bookmark or a little card with a QR code again to a Spotify or a printout of, well, you can go and listen to any of these songs.
Yeah, no, that's great because like I already write a little like fun thank you note whenever I sell a signed copy. So yeah, just flip on the back and then I'll either jot down here's the Spotify playlist that you can go to play as you're reading. You know, I think that's fantastic. And speaking of music, do you play any music when you write, or do you like it just dead silent?
I have to be dead silence. It
Okay.
has to be super quiet. I cannot deal with distractions. I can't write in coffee shops. I can't. I'm not that author. I wish I was that cool, one that everybody thinks is so suave. That's not me.
Yeah,
To
yeah,
be
fair.
super quiet. But I do. I've always kind of come up with different kind of inspirational or thematic soundtracks for my book series that I listen to when I'm getting in the mood to write, or if I'm doing the editing or the prep work for a launch. It's just fun to have that, and you're like, yeah, this one makes me think of this character. This makes me think of this scene or this world or this scenario, and it's always
Right.
fun to do. How about yourself?
Yes. More often than not, silence, I think, is what gets me in the zone the quickest. But I always like having some kind of music, and sometimes I try to force it, and then I'm like, okay, today it's not really doing it for me, so then I just like pause it. But other times, I could put on some like scores, like anything with like that's just instrumental. I do a lot of like John Williams. Um, I
Yes.
do, Lord of the Rings soundtrack. I do like National Treasure. I do, yeah, just a lot of fantastical sounding scores that kind of just gets me in the mood and just lets my creative juices flow.
So, we'll let you know if you, do Spotify and I'm assuming
Yeah.
Pandora and of course YouTube and all kinds of stuff. There are a bunch of, I don't know if they really call themselves, bands per se or musicians. I don't know how their term is, but they're geared to coming up with epic sounding soundtrack music. Just that's their theme. And one of my favorite ones is called Epic North. And if you listen to them, it's just a sweeping music of they have different sub themes of like this is cybernetic and this is epic fantasy and all this stuff. And
I
you
love
listen
that.
to them and it just like gets you like really in the mood.
Oh, wow. Okay, so Epic North, is that their name?
That's one of them, yes.
Great. Well, I will definitely look them up. That sounds fantastic. I love that.
It is the little things you discover when you're weird and quirky, and you look for the weird and quirky too.
Yes. Yeah, it just kind of comes out of the woodwork. You're like, oh, great. Something to connect with.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Before it gets too late in this hour, there are a couple things I always like to ask because if this platform is nice, and almost all the time it is, there have been a couple of weird glitches. I'll repurpose this video on my YouTube channel later, so if anybody stumbles upon it, wants to come back and check and reference anything, they can continue to find and hopefully follow you, and I'll put your
Awesome.
information down below. But for everybody here now, where can people find and follow you outside of Book Talk? So website, newsletter, other socials, where are you?
Yeah, I mean, currently right now I'm pretty skeletal. I just do my socials. I have obviously my TikTok account here,
Mhm.
Instagram, which is at Greg Heal 2. I have a YouTube account as well, which is at Gregory Heal. I do have an X or Twitter account, but I don't really post on that all that often. Yeah. But yeah, I've tried, but I haven't cracked that algorithm yet.
Yeah.
Because what I typically do is I film and edit all of my marketing videos on TikTok. I remove the watermark and then I place it on Instagram and YouTube and X or Twitter. And then I'm able to get some momentum on everyone except for X or Twitter. I don't know what it is.
They're a word-based one. Let's be real. They do that in maybe stills, but yeah, videos for me have never worked there. And I'm not those quick, quippy word-based things. So things like that, like I've never done Threads, I've never done Blue Sky, because everybody's like, oh, it's what Twitter used to be. And I'm like, well, I've never was good on Twitter either.
Right.
I don't know if I'll jump there. I'm on a lot of the other plethora of platforms that keep popping up, but not those, just because I do have an X that's just kind of floating there, but it's just because I'm not good with that style.
Yeah,
I like
no.
the video-based ones.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% on board with you on that. And so like every so often now, like it's funny that you mentioned that it's like it's word based. Every so often I'd throw something up, like I do like a fun quote out of one of my books, or I would ask a question. But yeah, like I don't post as often on X. There was another thing that I was going to mention. What was it? It'll oh yes. And then I do have a newsletter that's attached to my link tree, which is on my TikTok, on my YouTube, on my Instagram, where I do just weekly newsletter announcements, just like what's happening currently right now in my writing process, some questions that I have, like what to look forward to for this year. Because since I've announced that the third book is coming, Christmas of 2025, like I'm held to that, and then I'm like, okay, well, what other steps do I need to hit so that I can get to that actual release date? And so, I'll be doing a Kickstarter in the summer to help that. Yeah, so was a ton of fun. I did do a Kickstarter for Crusade last summer, and we met our funding goal within 24 hours, which was phenomenal. And so I'm excited to see what'll happen for the third book now, because my following has only grown since then. And hopefully I'm continuing to bring the excitement.
Yes, that's great. Yeah, I'm kind of. I haven't been sleeping lately because I'm working on planning in the back of my head. I was kind of working that process of what I'm going to be doing for the next couple Kickstarters, and what I want to change, what I want to adjust, because every time I do one, I've done it too. And I always follow fellow authors and see how they do and what they do. Yeah. So I'm always trying to adjust to get it better in various ways. And yeah, so it's a lot of fun, but there's a lot of things to think about. It's a lot of work too.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's always that like nervous anticipation, because it's like, you can set like the time, like I do 30 days, and it's like, well, there's a lot of like good engagement on my socials. Is that going to, transition into, people being interested in getting pre-orders or like fun tier levels? Cause I'm always like very cautious and like, oh my gosh, like, do I have imposter syndrome? Am I leading to believe myself that I'm better than I am or anything like that? But, I think it's just something that I have to work through, but it's so much fun and so worth it and fulfilling. Especially when you're like packaging those Kickstarter edition orders. And like, I like to do a little bit extra fun stuff where like all my signed copies, I do a green pen for like the Kickstarter edition. And then it's, speaking to that, kind of on a side tangent, but like it's interesting to see how my signature has evolved over the times of doing signed copies from 2019 to now. Like it's it's quicker. It's less like you can actually read each letter. So I find that really interesting.
That is kind of very neat. And it's fun to do like little special things for Kickstarters and make them, something that people want to collect in some way. So if you're like, hey, this is the only one you get, if you see a copy with a green signature, it is because it is a marker of, and it's neat that people do. They like even the little things like that, all the way to the super collector special edition, stuff, which that's one of my goals toward the end of the year is to run a Kickstarter for a special edition of one of my book series.
Yes.
That's all I'm going to say right now. In the works with commissioning a bunch of artists for that purpose. But talking about how much time, energy, money do you have? It's a lot. It's a lot to spend.
It is. I know. It definitely does get overwhelming when you like try to think about it all at once. So it's like, okay, like space it out. That's a phenomenal goal to have, because I've always in the back of my mind, I'm like, I would love to have a special edition of my books. And one that really stood out to me was Z.S. Diamante's Guard in the Garden. Like
What?
that, that it, phenomenal cover, like leather bound with like the silver accents. Like I loved that so much. And so I did reach out to him because we're friends on Book Talk, and I was like, hey, like, do you have any like um, advice or like where did you go to get that? Because like I am just in awe of how awesome it looks, and he was really helpful and sort of pointing me in the right direction.
Yeah, I don't know if that particular edition he used Book Vault, but I know a lot of authors use that particular company for their special editions. There are others out there as well,
Sure.
but yeah, it is really that kind of that. There's different levels of achievement, like the little achievement stickers that you give yourself and be like, yeah, I did this, and the
Right.
gold stars. That's one of those. I feel like authors all want to achieve the getting at least one special edition out there. Gold star.
Exactly, exactly. And like for me right now is like now that I'm now that I have two books out, I'm finishing a trilogy, like I know that I want to be a writer for the rest of my life. And so it's like I want to be able to keep telling decent enough stories. And when I started out, I was like, okay, I have this idea. How am I gonna think of another great idea? Like, when's it gonna come? Because you're looking at all these other like huge authors, that are traditionally published, and like they're just coming out with all these different series, or especially with like thrillers or like crime dramas, like the same character, like they have 21 books of it. And I'm like, how can you be so creative to think of a book, just in this huge, score of a series and just still enrapture readers and make it fun for them to come back. Like that was something I was struggling with. I'm like, I don't want to like this to be my only one, and then I'm just out. But I think you just got like as creatives, like things just kind of come into your brain randomly, like without you necessarily thinking about it. And in the 5 years since I published Heritage, I have thought of just I've had other sparks of like, oh, I think this would be
And
a
now you
cool,
put your notepad and
yeah,
write it down.
right. And so like I have a list of like, okay, these are the stories that I want to pursue when I've tied up Sky Jewel Legacy with a nice bow. And I would love to go back into that world and like flesh it out, do like an origin story or side quests, or just just to build the world out. But there's another series that I'm going to write after this trilogy. I'm really excited about it. It's going to be in a fantasy world, and the magic system is going to be very dark, but also really interesting. And I'm like the funny thing that I'm a fantasy author, but fantasy isn't my favorite genre to like read or to watch.
Interesting. Okay.
Don't tell anyone this, and it's probably not good that I'm saying this over live, but I have never made it through a full Lord of the Rings movie. I've always fallen asleep.
They
Like
are long. They are long. I will give you
they
that.
are like I just never could get into it. And growing up, like I read everything Star Wars. So I thought like if I was going to be an author, it would be sci-fi. But then this thing came out of left field, and I was like, okay, I'll let it evolve. But yeah, like so fantasy is a genre that I love writing in, but in terms of reading, it's going to be sci-fi. But I am merging more into fantasy books as well. Like I recently read The Lies of Locke Lamora, if you've heard of that one,
I
by
haven't read
Scott
that one yet,
Lynch.
but yes, I've heard that one. Yes.
So good. It's so good. And so like yeah, it's just really interesting to see where your career kind of takes you as an author.
I did
But
see a
yeah,
couple of comments coming up to the fact that you have not watched Lord of the Rings. That what's this blasphemy? And too late, we all know now. But here's the thing: is
yeah,
here's the thing is when it comes to your passions, it's interesting. Like I approached fantasy because I love mythology. Now, I still love, I'm a person who loves to watch fantasy movies and shows and all that, but I never really read a lot of iconic and concurrent fantasy until joining this platform. I wrote fantasy because I love mythology, and that's what inspired me. because that's the precursor to fantasy of today in many ways. But it is interesting because people will talk about the iconic stuff, and I'm like, I haven't read it yet. It's now on, most of those are now on my to-read list, and a few of them I've checked off. But
Right.
it is kind of funny because everybody's like, well, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, I haven't read Brandon Sanderson.
Yeah, right, exactly. And and Sanderson is now on my TBR, and a lot of people with my videos, I'm like, oh, what's trending right now is spicy fantasy, like clean fantasy is like where I decided to write. They're like, oh no, like you have to check out Brandon Sanderson because like the majority of his work is clean. And so I really didn't hear of him until getting on this platform and just doing my videos. So since then, he does some great lecture series. He's currently doing one for 2025, just talking about like plotting and like, tonal promises and just like how, to hopefully hone your writing as a sci-fi or fantasy author. So for anyone who's looking for that extra, bit of, potential helpful knowledge, I definitely recommend checking out his lecture series.
That's great. I love that advice because there are so many people who want to know about how to get started or want to know the steps it takes. And there are plenty of us like myself that I always try to challenge myself to constantly educate myself and keep pushing myself forward. Now, if I read a book on craft or whatever, I might know 95% of it, but that other 5% could be a game changer. So that's why you continue to re-educate yourself, push yourself forward, try to improve, etc., so on. Yeah. But let me also ask, because this I feel is another important question, where can people get your books? We already talked about you sell signed copies directly, and that's fantastic, so everybody should listen to that one first. But where else can people get your books if they're not going directly to you?
Yeah, just straight on Amazon. You just search Sky Jewel Legacy, both Heritage and Crusade will pop up. I have it available as an ebook. It's also a part of the Kindle Unlimited program, paperback and hardcover.
Fantastic. Yeah, there are a lot of people who love KU, and I had used it for years and years. I decided to go and try moving my stuff wide and see how that goes for right now, and that's what I'm doing. But yeah, KU is great because there are definitely an endless supply of readers on there.
Yes, and that's what I learned because like you, I kind of decided to not renew for a couple of months and just to see like if I could put it Barnes Noble or just to spread it out. But then I brought it back on, and then when I finally found my type of marketing, like last month, I set a new record in terms of Kindle pages read. It's like 50,000 in a month, and I'm like, that is just so hard for me to like just to fathom because I'm like, I only have 2 books out, and cumulatively they're like 750 pages or something like that, and I'm like, how like 50,000 in 30 days, like that's. So it was very exciting, but also very humbling, and saying like that's why like I need to make sure that whatever I release, it's going to be my best work ever, and it's going to be almost indistinguishable from any kind of book that you would find on a bookshelf that currently has a traditional publisher, sort of pushing it on the marketing side.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's something people should be aware of. Not to be afraid to use some of these niche terms because, yes, in theory, there's going to be a smaller market for them. But because they're niche, you're getting the people who want your book. And that's why they're amazing because it's an interesting topic that I've heard periodically of there's always going to be someone complaining there are too many subgenres, too many of these kind of terms out there. Why don't we just call fantasy? But the counter is there's so much type of fantasy. How do you know that book's going to be perfect for you? And that's why we have these distinct things. Noble Bright, clean fantasy, isekai, portal fantasy, all these kind of terms that are very niche, cozy fantasy, but do matter because when you use them, you should be catching pretty much the right audience.
Yeah, I mean, it's so true. And I can't help but think of just my time in college when I decided to be a general business major because I thought that having my hands in all the types of accounting, finance, marketing, supply chain, that I would potentially, be more marketable. But it's like if you specialize as a marketing major, then then you have more of a potential success to get attracted by these companies after you graduate, or just even more like with creatives too. It's like if you're starting a YouTube channel about video games, like, okay, cool, that's very broad, but then you can specify to like Pokemon video games. That will take off because there's so many people that are abundantly like passionate about Pokemon, and you'll have a constant source of engagement, readership, things like that. And then that's what I've learned too. It's like it helps to specialize, it helps to nicheify yourself so that you can really get those extremely passionate advocates for you. And yeah, just really thankful for that kind of epiphany that I just learned over the last decade, I guess, of trying to fight it.
Well, and I think that's an important thing to realize, because niching down can do a lot of benefit for you. Now, that's not always, again, not always the case. You can be that wonderful person that, right, and whatever you do can be fantastic in a broad scope. But I have realized as the years go by, when I look for things like cover designers, etc., so on, I'm looking for an artist that specifically does a certain type, a genre, a subgenre, knows a certain niche, right, because I need you to know my market. I need you to know what you're doing. And when I see or I hear artists like, oh, I do all sorts of things, I'm more hesitant because they may still be fantastic and actually do it. But I want to know that you know my niche, because it's an investment as my side of things, and I really want it to work. So, well,
the visions have to align, right? And that's the most important thing.
Yeah. And that goes for, I think, a lot of things. Is sometimes everything has to align in that perfect way, and there's a bit of luck in life when that happens too. That's okay. But it's when you're not lucky, you do everything else.
Right. Yes. Yeah. I mean, just get yourself out there. Like, luck favors the prepared. And if you're out there, you're doing your stuff, you're consistent, you're not giving up, luck becomes less luck and more of like that's going to be the next step that you're going to hit. It's, you're going to, all it takes is one person or one view or one certain thing, because you never know. And that's what I've been, always just focused on. Because when I wrote my book, like I was like, I'm just going to see if I can write a book, if I have the chops to tell an engaging story. But then now, since I'm getting into marketing and it's becoming a trilogy, it's like it would be really cool to get more people to read this, to get the hype going, and to see what can come from it,
Yep. And guess what? Once you have it and you're done with it, that doesn't mean you're done with it. You can always come back a little bit later because trends change, etc. So on. I said this before, that you can re-release an alternate cover. You can do this and catch people's attention all over again. And because you've spent the work and you have your wonderful stories, and there are going to be always more people that are out there ready to appreciate your work. You just have to, again, find them. Find you.
Yeah.
But since the hour's almost at a close, this is that perfect time that I like to ask you, at Gregory, as well as anyone else that's listening in, is there any topic you wanted to cover that we didn't cover, or any question you had that you didn't get asked yet? As well as, did you have any announcements you wanted to give for any reason?
Oh, wow. I mean, I'm always just really curious on if you're like a discovery writer or like an outline writer. That would be the only thing that I would say that I was just curious to ask before ending. And for announcements, no, just keep tuning in. You never know what kind of wacky or fun videos I'll use, to promote my books. But I'm super proud of my story. And I would be honored if you would, take the time to come along the journey with me.
I love it. And one of your announcements that you forgot is keep an eye out towards the end of the year, because the third one should be releasing. See.
You're right. Thank you, co-host. You definitely caught me there. Yeah. So the third and final book of my Sky Jewel Legacy series will be released at the end of this year. Perfect timing for Christmas gifts.
Yay! Yeah. Yes. What is going to be too early for Christmas gifts, but if people want, is next Tuesday I'll be releasing the final omnibus of my Viking Dark Fantasies series. The ebooks are all out there. They've been out there for a little while, but this will be the first time the final 4 novellas will be in print form, so Tuesday is their release. Now, as far as your question, I am kind of that in between. There's like all different terms. There's like planters and pantsers. And one of the ones I think is really cute is planter. You plant the seed and let it grow. So a little bit of both, where I do, up until, there's one exception, there's always going to be exceptions. Up until this one book, I've always kind of had a loose outline. I already knew the end game. I kind of know the main themes, characters, etc., so on. And I'm okay with the story kind of almost taking a life of its own and organically telling me sometimes subplots or introducing characters and kind of, again, that whole self-creation aspect of storytelling is really fascinating to me. Yes. But I do have one exception. Last year I was working on the 6th book of my YA Clean Fantasy series, and it just felt so forced. I wasn't getting anywhere. I was beating my head on the proverbial desk, and I was like, this needs more attention because there are too many plot lines, too many characters, and I really need to structure the outline in a better way than I've ever done, a little more in depth than I've ever done before. So I put a pin on that one, wrote a different story, and now I'm coming back to it and approaching it a little differently than I've done, I guess, in the past. So each story is different. They all need something, but I like that kind of center thing where have a good enough outline for whatever I need, but not be too stringent because it's fun to see the story come to life.
Yeah, because like when I'm writing like that, I almost feel like I'm reading it for the first time along with my readers. It's like, oh, and so I get excited. Like, oh my gosh, like that's like such a cool scene, or like I can't believe they said that. And so I do like your term of planter, but I would lean more towards. It's great. It's great. But I would lean more toward like a pantser because like there are these main beats that I want to hit, but like I had the genesis of my story. I didn't know how it was going to end. Like I know that I'm going to hit some certain tropes or like, okay, but that was kind of my like fun thing in the back of my mind. It's like, okay, how can I let my characters just organically take the story, and then I'll kind of just like iron it out, you know, and smoothen it out as I continue to write. Because I personally like Crusade a lot more than Heritage because you get on more of like that adventure aspect, like globe-trotting sort of thing. Both are great, but more of the adventure is here, and this is more of, you know, the exposition. But it was so interesting because when I initially thought of it back in 2017, Crusade was nothing like what it ended up being, and I feel like it's so much richer and better that I kind of just had, I planted the seed and I just kind of let it just grow as I was writing. And the ending of this trilogy is far different than how I initially saw it. Okay. And it's just cool to have like that dichotomy. And that's why I know that I'm definitely more of a discovery writer than an outliner.
Hey, that's perfectly fine because everybody approaches storytelling their own way because everybody's wired a little different. And that's fine. You just have to find the way that works for you and maximize on that one.
Yes, it's also so funny because I've noticed like my best burst of creative energy happens the instant I get out of my writer's block. Because like if something happens and I'm in a predicament, you know, it might take me a day or two, it might take me a month, but like whenever I'm able to do it.
I was going to show you my writer's block. It actually
my gosh.
Writer's block on it.
I love that. But like every time I am able to get through writer's block, I have this second wind and my story pivots a little bit, or like I bring in a character that I never had in my notes before. And like that happened in Heritage. And she's one of my favorite characters now. Like she has such an interesting backstory and what's going to happen. Like it's so like for me like that. it's funny. A lot of people are like, ah, I dread the writer's block. I'm like, no, bring it on because that's when I'm at my most creative because it really forces me to think through it, you know?
That's fantastic. And that's a skill that not everybody is easily to achieve, easily able to kind of achieve, get over that kind of issue of writer's block. So that is always a good thing that you are finding ways to deal with that because it can be crippling for some authors out there, but it
Right.
sounds like you're figuring out how to get around those bumps.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it's not difficult. It very much is like while when I'm in the middle of it, but it's just like I'll keep working at it. I'll keep working. I'll think different, angles. Like what can I do? And then yeah, it just kind of hits me one day. I'm like, oh my gosh, we're doing that. It's just like it's so refreshing. I love it.
Oh, I love those breakthrough moments. There was one the other day that I don't know if I was driving or something. I was just in a weird scenario. And I was like, ooh, cannot forget this, cannot forget this. As soon as I got home, I like ran to my notepad. I was like, jot it down, jot it down, jot it. Figured it out.
I love that. And then I mean, just I gotta say, it's like thank you so much for bringing me on this live. Like it means a lot to me because I love connecting with other indie authors and hearing their story and just getting a chance to talk about my books and my journey. So like this just motivates me even more to continue to write. And I know that we'll stay in touch and then just grow this community into probably one of the best ones that we can see yet.
Absolutely. And as you were saying, if you ever want to join in another one of these, now I schedule them in advance, or at least try to, but I do host them weekly. I would love to have you back some point, maybe even when you launch the ending of your trilogy.
You know what? I will take you up on that. Let's do it.
And I do see also Rocco, saying, the most high energy dancer I see on my TikTok. Great job, buddy. Glad to see your success. So that's fantastic.
That's awesome.
But thank you for everybody who's come and joined us this past hour. And thank you, Gregory, for hanging out with me. And we'll definitely be keeping in touch.
Oh my gosh, this was a blast. Thank you so much. I'm very honored.
So glad. And for everybody, have a wonderful rest of your evening and week.
Yes, take care.
Bye, everyone.